I'm really curious about the impact of the universal basic income in your city, because this is something that liberals have talked about a tremendous amount. You guys have dispersed over $1 million to. Can you say is it to everyone in Stockton?
I wish it was to everyone in Stockton, but what we did was do a representative sample. So it's only to 125 people, but those 125 people were randomly selected, but selected in a way where they mirror just the city in terms of employment status, in terms of salary, in terms of race and age, etc. What
No
we
class or need base.
no, so the only criterion to be selected was folks had to live in a zip code at or below the city's median income, which is a kind of requirement, but 75% of the city qualified. So the vast majority of folks in Stockton qualify, and we see the folks in the program, there's people making as high as 80, 90K and people who don't have any income. So it's been interesting to see how, despite the variations in income, that it's been helpful to everyone. It's particularly during this time.
Well, how much did these people get?
Only $500, so $500 a month.
$500 a month.
Yeah.
Okay, so not a life-changing amount of money.
Well, what's funny, it sounds like not a life changing, Torre, but for a lot of people, it literally was life changing in terms of folks who are able to leave abusive relationships, because they're able to save up and put a down payment on their own apartments, to folks who are able to take time off their job so they can interview for another job and then end up getting that job. To folks, especially now during COVID-19, who haven't been able to access unemployment insurance, but the $500 a month is like their literal lifeline that's helping them persist during this time. And for me, it's just been really inspiring, but also kind of heartbreaking to your earlier question. And inspiring in that, wow, like $500 a month seems feasible and doable and not too big. But also heartbreaking, like, damn, for so many people, $500 is the difference between being evicted or not, or being hungry or not, or being able to stay home with COVID or not. Like that for me is frightening.
So what are the best and worst outcomes of this? Can we call it an experiment?
Yeah,
Okay, so
I
what are the
think
best
that
and worst outcomes?
I think the best outcome has been, um, and that's still being it's done in January. There'll be a full evaluation next year. So my researchers, if you're listening, don't be mad. This is from my non PhD vantage point. But the best outcomes thus far have been just how people are spending money and having very clear data that these notions we have about people and how and when we say people, we know that's racialized and that's otherized. So how people of color, how black people, how folks who may be struggling to spend money is not fundamentally different than how other people spend money. The majority of money for the past 20 months has been spent on food and then utilities, then on emergencies and merchandise. Very little, at least from that $500, has been spent on drugs and alcohol, which I think just kept coming up as we were announced that we're doing the program. And then the other great finding, I think, has been this idea around health outcomes. I've just heard anecdotally, and I think will play out in the evaluation, that for a lot of people, they're reporting feeling less anxious, less stressed, able to breathe because they don't have the albatross of economic insecurity around their necks. In terms of kind of worst outcomes, it would probably be that for a lot of people, the $500, not someone might say this is a worse outcome. I actually think it's a good outcome as well, but the $500 didn't radically change everyone's employment status. That $500 didn't radically move everyone into the middle class, which speaks to maybe the amount should be larger. But even then, the fact that it didn't make people stop working and didn't make people quit their jobs, I think is also a powerful indicator that this is something that some would argue needs to be fully evaluated. I think, given the moment we're in now, it's something that has to be implemented. Like it's just something we need. Like everyone should have like an income floor.
I mean, I think in a world where, jobs are precarious, where unemployment can be high, where we're seeing a rise in, robots doing jobs that we did, 5, 10, 15 years ago, you need to provide some basic form of assistance. I mean, just even think about, the millions of people not having economic anxiety. And and look, you're not going to get rich with UBI, but just not feeling economic anxiety, that would have a massive impact on the whole country.
That's literally the argument. The argument is that we give basic income to folks who don't need it through very generous tax breaks, through very generous subsidies, through very generous bailouts. And it doesn't really get to the majority of people in this country who power our economy. And $500 isn't enough to buy a yacht. It isn't enough to have an offshore account, but it is enough to pay your bills. And I think the fact that people are only saying in the 21st century, let's have a dignity-based economy that provides the baseline basics, that's a good thing because that's like a really a bare minimum. Like I just want enough money in a society that creates so much wealth. I just want enough so I'm not homeless. Like that should be something we can all rally around and say, well, that's the least we can do.
I mean, it's interesting because it seems like it's important to see it in action with a much larger group of people, right? Because it's a small group of folks who were benefiting from this. I mean, like if everybody in Stockton is getting it, then what is the impact on Stockton?
Oh my gosh, if everyone in Stockton had a guaranteed income, I think all the issues that people are upset about that we're working on to improve would be solutions would be more rapidly found. When I think of kind of homelessness and housing insecurity, and how the issue is that half of my population is rent poor and pays more than 30% of their income on rent. And $500 would be enough to allow people to know that they can afford rent and mortgage every month. When I think of sort of the issues we have with crime, and understanding that historically our issues with violence crime have been tied with neighborhoods with high poverty. And it's giving folks the $500 a month need might not dissuade everyone, but it will dissuade some people from robbing. It will dissuade some people from picking up a gun. It will dissuade some people from committing crime. When I think of sort of even just the educational outcomes, we're laser focused on raising the educational level of our community. And money helps with that because we know that when parents have money, they're more present. When parents have money, they don't have to work two jobs. When kids have enough food, when kids have a safe space to work, when kids have reliable internet, they're able to excel. So and that's why we start the Mayors for Guaranteed Income group with now 25 mayors across the nation, understanding that it's great for the 125 people in the pilot, but I wanted to see for all of my residents. And the only way to get there would be with federal action.
Yeah, it's hard to see this with such a small group, but have you seen an impact on crime?
Yeah, well, we've seen an impact on violent crime in particular, not necessarily because of the guaranteed income program, but because of the same principles. So we have a program called Advanced Peace that we're running with another program called Ceasefire. What Advanced Peace does is it identifies the less than 1% of the population that commits 80% of our gun crimes and targets these men with case managers, tattoo removals, etc., like they would get targeted from police. But after 6 months, they're eligible for a stipend. They're eligible for $500 a month fellowship to continue making progress. And that program's about 2 years old now. We know the fellowships have just started, but I'm confident that we'll continue to see a reduction in our violent crime because I just think opportunity is the best antidote. And folks have to be able to eat, have to provide for themselves and their family, have to be able to buy clothes to interview, etc.